This first session is going to be on the tapping the potential between synergy and the synergy between quality and growth. You know, in the time that we're dealing with in COVID-19, online programming has really been highlighted by many of the institutions around the United States and throughout the world. They've had to jump into online education. Some of them haven't been really doing that before, but they were kind of forced into doing so to accommodate their students. As they jumped in, though, they found that some of their efforts were kind of uninformed. They learned the hard way how hard it is to put traditional learning into an online format. And sometimes they put it out there in a way that didn't appeal to students. And while we regularly focus on the concept of quality in higher education, understanding what quality really is can be a difficult thing to quantify. The danger we focus is really having this nebulous idea of quality and forgetting about how important it is to be growing at the same time as focusing on quality. That tension between growth and quality is something we really have to embrace. To have both, to have quality and growth, we have to embrace that tension between the two. Without students and growth, quality doesn't matter. And without quality, students will understand that they don't matter to the institution. So let me ask you the question, what is growth to you? Is it more people, more programs, more money, better stuff for your institution? What is it? Get that mental picture of what growth is to your program and your organization in your mind. So you have some ideas of what growth is to you. Let's talk about some realities, though. Let's talk about life cycles. Everything that I can think of in the physical world has a life cycle, and that can be represented by a bell curve. So when you think of any of the things that you just put on in your mind about growth, it can be measured on a life cycle. Some of those life cycles are tall and bigger, some are short and longer, and I'll spare you the discussion of the statistical aspects of the bell curve from my time teaching doctoral level stats. However, colleges have a life cycle too, and unfortunately, some of them are on the downside of their life cycles. Programs are in decline, giving is in decline, student numbers and tuition are in decline, reserves are in decline, staff and faculty counts as a result are in decline. Some time ago, I was on site at a college, and the leader I spoke to at the college understood these life cycles all too well. He knew that his programs were on the downward side of the life cycle. He had just been hired by that institution and noted that the previous leaders had taken their eyes off of the programs and they were in decline. This is the picture of many colleges today, unfortunately. But growth should be something different than just a single life cycle. When I think of growth, this is the picture that I think of in terms of a bell curve. Each of your institutions has 100 different bell curves that show its growth or decline. I suspect that they're not neatly stacked like this, but for simplicity, let's just say that they are. This is called an S curve, and it's stacked normal distributions, and they demonstrate growth. Your original institution is this bottom bell curve. That's what it was originally founded for. It was established for some particular reason, whether it was a specific program, a specific cause, a vision, something that it was put together for. That is its original institutional purpose, its original institutional bell curve. That life cycle is what it's on. Now, if you never did anything, if you didn't add any new programs, you didn't change anything, you didn't grow the institution with its vision, you would just eventually go down on the downside of the bell curve that would really help you, or would make you see that there isn't anything growing at the institution. However, what we want to have happen is that we have new changes, we have new things that are happening, we have growth occurring, and this stacked bell curve really helps you see where your institution is growing. And obviously, if you stack these curves, if you can think of this, each of them has a downside. So eventually, if you don't continue the growth, if you don't add the bell curves, they overall, all of the bell curves make a larger institutional bell curve. and it begins to decline if you don't continue to grow. Let's talk about the concept of quality. I'd suggest that one of the things that really leads to growth and will affect your growth initiatives is quality. Now, you might be, as a higher institution person, going, well, of course, we are all about quality. We do quality programs. And the principles of quality that you put into practice or don't in every area of your organization will lead to growth or lead to decline. As an institution of higher education, quality is probably in your vernacular due to one particular thing, and that's accreditation. That's a quality process. However, it's more than just accreditation that makes you a quality organization. And chasing quality as a nebulous term will keep you from growing and reaching quality. Now, one of the things that many people don't get is that improving your processes, your systems, everything about the aspect of quality will make quality free, because there's a cost for your poor quality. When you have errors, when you have defects, when you have to redo things, when you have failed customer services, those things cost your institution. But when you do the work of correcting those errors and removing defects and avoiding the rework and serving your customers, your students well, or your constituents, your donors, when you do that well, you have the cost of doing things right. And when you do that, it removes the cost. So you're building quality over here on the right-hand side, and it removes the cost that it's taking to have all the errors and the defects in your processes and your procedures and in your offerings. A general rule of thumb, about 10 to 15% of your operational costs, that's what it's costing you for poor quality. So when you think about how can I save the money that I'm going to need to develop my quality systems and procedures, by just developing your quality process and working through the systems, et cetera, you're going to save about 10 to 15% right there. Phil Crosby, one of the gurus of quality, one of the big three quality gurus in the United States, said that about 20% of operating budget. So when you continue to pay that cost of the poor quality, you're losing 20%. So if you can think of your budget, if you had 20% more to build in your quality systems, that would more than pay for what you're wanting to do in most cases. One of the things that we always talk about in quality management terms is really this promise to exchange your value for value when you're working with your clients. You're giving students an education, they're paying you for that. And that's a real important aspect. Are you keeping the promise to your students? When you say that you're going to offer them a quality education, are you doing that? So when you leave out the aspects of quality in your process, you're telling them that they're not important. You're not giving them the value that they are really asking for. So when we think about our customer, are we really helping to understand our education is giving them what they need? Imagine, if you will, a student who goes through your programs and they're underprepared for the market because they didn't get a quality education. Of course, we would never think that we want to offer something like that. But let's say that you do that. When you do that, what does that affect? Yeah, it probably affects them having a poor understanding of the topic. But what if it keeps them from getting a job? What if they get the job and they don't know what they're doing and they end up getting fired? What if, worst case scenario, they implement information that is incorrect? Let's take one that's real tangible. What if they work for a tire manufacturing company, and because of their misunderstanding of the concepts of their degree program, their training, they develop a tire that is poor and it causes accidents that kill people? That's a real tangible piece of a poor quality system. That's what our education, that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to give the highest value by keeping our promise to give our students a quality education. Now, as I mentioned before, we often have this understanding in higher education that accreditation is related to quality, and absolutely it is. But it goes much beyond that for our terms. Accreditation is what we call a first dimension of quality. it's permission based. It's everything from your state recognition, it's your incorporation, it's the accreditation pieces that you're going to go through. But it doesn't stop there. Quality goes much further than that. So when you think about what your institution is doing to give your systems and your procedures, you have to think beyond that to a second and third dimension. First of all, the process and procedures in the second dimension, those are some of the things that you're going to start developing in doing a good job. If you know that serving your students is important, you're going to have to develop the systems for doing that. Everything from the recruiting efforts to the student services after they're recruited and they're in their classes, the services you're going to provide them through library, the services that your faculty are going to provide them. All those things are starting to look at a very proactive way of reaching out to your constituents. Another final dimension is that third dimension, and we start looking at the people and products, and that's us as the leaders and individuals working for the institutions. We're wanting to make sure that our staff and faculty are solidly developing our quality mindset for reaching out to our constituents. And a lot of times we look at the products that we are offering, or the services, our curriculum, our learning, the things that we're giving to our students. We have to make sure that those are quality as well. So when we talk about the quality frame, our first one is an external influence. Our first dimension, that's an external influence on us. Then when we look, and it's very reactive, because we have to do those things to make sure things are going well. And then we start looking at, okay, let's look at the internal things. Let's look at our systems, our process, our procedures, and that's us starting to think about it proactively. How do we make sure that what we're doing is meeting our needs, the needs of our constituents? And then we start looking at the people and products, and that's our inputs and outputs. Our people are the real inputs of our quality system, and they are developing a quality product or services that we're going to give to our students. And that's where real growth begins to happen, is we begin to think about how do we expand, how do we give out what we're supposed to be doing for our institutions. And I talked a little bit about this before. Growth comes from these new life cycles. However, some of the new life cycles that must be here, these are some of the things that must be implemented to really give us this growth. And it's things like new programs and locations and formats, innovations, efficiency, strategies. All of these things are developed based on a growth mindset. We're having this mindset of looking for all things new on our institutions. I also wanted to give a couple of practical growth strategies. And what I've done, while we didn't have the time to really cover the specific pieces of what we're talking about as far as what quality management values, I have listed them in here so you can kind of get an information. If you want more information on quality management, what that is all about, please contact me. We can talk about that further offline. But one of the things for higher education institutions is looking at what are we doing to bring people into our institution? To do that, we recommend strongly having a VP in charge of your enrollment for adult and online. Since we're talking about that in our conference, we're looking at a VP in charge of enrollment, someone with authority to really do a good job of recruiting. Another thing, make sure that you have a great campus visit program several times per year. Use your social media. Make sure that you're having ways to do that, particularly in this day and age. Look at virtual opportunities to have that campus visit system. Make sure that you're looking on transfers going into other programs. Keep your promise to your students by helping them get into the programs that they need to be getting into for transitions in their work life, that sort of thing. Focus on adult learners. Of course, we're about that. So when you think about the population of your institution, is it more traditional and you've left out the adult and online? Are you're really focusing on getting your adult learners built into who you are as an institution? If you're not getting that group, your adult and online learners, you're missing out on a pretty significant portion of the population that you could be affecting with your mission and your vision. Make sure that you do talk about your accreditation, your low cost, the things that you're doing, that you're able to help students get the accredited courses that they need at the pricing that they need. Develop partnerships. Work with churches, businesses, schools. Work with any group that you feel like can be another pool for quote unquote fishing for new students. I always think about that term when I'm looking for institutions to grow their student base, is fish in new ponds. Make sure you're starting online programs, and that's, of course, we're very focused on that here. That's one of the main things that we do. We help institutions develop online programs. But if you're not doing that in your institution, you're missing a very large portion of your student population. And look at what the market needs. Who are you as an institution that needs to be put out there in the market in an online format? And then let's talk about developing new programs. Don't just develop one program and be done, because remember your life cycle. If you only do one program, you're only getting the benefit of one bell curve. But continue to develop your programs, continue to add new things, continue to meet the market where it's at, and develop diverse programs. Just because you start in one area doesn't mean you can't expand to other areas. Just because you start with one group of students doesn't mean you can't reach out to another group of students. And above all, as leaders, keep positive and share your vision of who you are as an institution. Make sure that you're really moving forward with what you're supposed to be doing as an institution. I'd like to open it up for questions now. I'm going to open the chat area, and if you have a question, please feel free to share that with me. What are some of the fast growth areas of 2020 and 2021? So to answer that question, there's certainly the aspect of looking at the healthcare side. That's going to be a growing one for a while. Another one that we are seeing interest areas in, informatics, helping looking at the digital side of things, making sure that you're really developing a new focus on the technological aspects of running your business. On number 4 on that list, can you explain the 70 to 40 means? 70 to 40, 400 in reference to focusing on adult learners, for sure. So let me actually go back to that. So that's the additional numbers of students that you would potentially see in a new program. So when we talk about a recruiter recruiting students to a new program, we're looking at roughly 70 students per recruiter per full-time recruiter that we're talking about bringing into a program. And oftentimes we have someone that's just starting out. That 70 is kind of the baseline number. If they're not really recruiting 70-ish, that's just a 70-ish, I'll say it that way. If we're not recruiting that number of students per recruiter per year, we're probably trying to find that recruiter a new role. And sometimes that's inside the institution, and sometimes that's not inside the institution. Truthfully, when I was with Indiana Wesleyan, we had one recruiter that was in the 300 level per year, that they were recruiting that many students to the program each year. So that's kind of that number. Whenever you bring a new program into there, you're developing a potential for that new 70 to 400 students.